Excellent. Thank you very much, Hugh. Lovely to meet you all. I just need to check with my colleague Armin here, who's running the session with me. Armin, are you pulling the slides up?
I would love to, but someone has to give me the host rights so I can post the slides.
We haven't agreed that with you guys.
Yeah, we felt like you're missing PowerPoint a little bit throughout the last 2 hours, so we got plenty of these.
Gillian or Hugh, I don't know who of you has host rights. If you assign them to Armin, then he'll do that at some point.
Yeah, Rachel's on the case. So.
Awesome. Cool. Great. Well, fantastic to meet you all. It was really stimulating. I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed the last hour and a half and hearing the reflections. And in my mind, you know, loads of questions were emerging, which I think are an opportunity for Armin and I here in the masterclass to provide a platform for us all to reflect on. And for me, really some of the key questions that have emerged here in the discussions are, surely, you know, there is a huge opportunity for HR, but there is also a huge pressure really on HR's shoulders. So we are really keen to use this masterclass to start and create the translation from this complexity that we've just opened up in terms of, you know, the workforce transformation and challenges on the future of work and the role HR has in making this successful, and start to translate that complexity into something that feels manageable. I think that is, for me, the key point where we're at now. And if we look at where we are at in terms of the evolution process, you know, HR has already come a huge way from, you know, the traditional way of looking at HR, industrial relations focused, general HR, and then, you know, obviously we're all very familiar with the Ulrich model that has shaped across this time. And even pre-COVID, we were getting obviously to a huge imperative for HR to drive digitalization through the function. But then COVID hit. I mean, this year has been, you know, obviously a year like no other, and especially for HR, it's been an accelerator. We've heard this in some comments in the session, and I'm sure all of you have seen this quote this year, and I really do believe it is true. But we are also in December now, and I bet a huge number of you are knackered. You know, it's been tiring, and HR has been phenomenal in rising to the challenge and keeping everyone safe and getting everyone functioning from home. And it's been a huge effort for HR. And then you look at the discussion that we're having here now, and we're starting to talk about how do we need to transform the function. You know, with my mind in the, you know, in the corporate world, where I was before I joined Mercer 5 years ago, I can't help but think, oh my God, geez, not another HR transformation, because we've done HR transformations over the last decade. We've done it to get our HRIS systems going. We've done it to gain efficiencies, and what's next? So really the focus I think for our conversation needs to be, you know, how can we make this happen in a way that we can actually, you know, deliver, you know, from a manpower perspective, from an energy perspective, resource perspective. So when you look at the, you know, the big trends that have started to really push HR forward around digitalization and automation, they really haven't changed, but COVID has accelerated them. COVID has put additional focus on them, and Isabel from Abbey and Ambro, you know, you've talked about the rise of the importance of purpose, right? I mean, that's something that we see hugely accelerated in importance. People, you know, stuck at home, you know, what am I doing this for? You know, the importance of purpose is huge, and employee experience is a very, very important one too. I mean, what have been your reflections listening to the conversation earlier?
Well, as you just referred to, right, it's all about, you know, transforming again or still transforming. and now having the impact showing of COVID-19. I thought it was an interesting discussion because it's all about, you know, who are we serving and how is this changing? I was hearing so different opinions on, you know, who to focus on first. Is it leadership topics again? Is it strategic contribution? Is it just a regular workforce we are serving? Who should we aim for when we are kind of reshaping our HR organization? I mean, one thing got pretty obvious. We got to be much quicker because the next normal, as I like to call it, was there already, right? And now HR needs to catch up. But as we learned also from our data, the demand and the success elements for HR transformation didn't change much. They've just gotten much quicker, right? It's one thing. And the other thing I want to add when it comes to purpose and new generation, it's also about talent sustainability or people sustainability. We have touched on sustainability in a different context, but I think it's also important to talk about how HR needs to drive a certain people sustainability, meaning talent remains in the organization, talent stays remains ready to contribute, even though there is a different environment now and a different reality now. So how can HR, the function, but also good leadership instruments foster that? I think these are the things I picked up out of the conversation earlier. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, the future of work is setting a huge contextual frame around what HR will have to deliver. And I think we're all only just starting to understand what the future of work will really look like. And from personal perspective, or maybe your data within your company is telling it to you right now, but we are seeing it across our research. There is this, this curve that people's gone to, 90% of companies have seen productivity increases through remote working. So that's hugely positive news. But then there is this huge potential for dip. So, a Zoom meeting is not necessarily a great Zoom meeting, and there are impacts on wellness and mental health that we're just starting to see really emerging. So there is a big implication on the employee experience again. So the employee experience from our perspective is really, to Patrick's point, what's the driving paradigm here? Is it processes, is efficiency, and his hypothesis around, you have to give way to one, if you prioritize the other. From our perspective, it is without doubt the employee experience that is the driving paradigm for HR to organize around, but it has to be done in a way that doesn't leave the other paradigms fall off the cliff. And we are hugely convinced that that is possible to achieve a balanced and holistic view of doing it. And then, the speed, agility that's come up loads in the comments earlier already. How do you do this in a way that's quick? It doesn't take you 2 years, and in that time, the business strategy has already changed, and you can start again.
Well, and we talked about the bio activities. We talked about employee relations. I mean, how does that work in this hybrid or remote setting, actually, right? If that has been a very manual process in the past, then suddenly you have to run it from home, right? Or even serve it from home if HR folks are also back at home, right? That's a relevant question to maintain the workforce. And the strategy consultant is only talking about, the savings you could have in real estate costs, right? But you also need to calculate the counter cost. How does that harm the employee experience? So that being said, the employee experience is really falling short, Natalie, right? So this is there is a gap which needs to be bridged when it comes to the perception. I mean, the inequality is increasing, and uncertain future. We see a declining health and also a lack of empathy with this distance setup that we are seeing, right? And this is the result if you go to Google, right? You can try it out. My job is, and this is what's on the uprise, where we see like, oh, right, this is not the right way. And the question is, this workforce of the future, who will embrace that? Parts of it will be leadership work, parts of it will be HR work, but we see HR as the key function to enable this workforce transformation, which is why HR needs to speed up in their own transformation, right? And let's refocus on business contribution. And there's also a nice quote from Carol Wayne about customer experience and employee experience and how this correlates. Your customer experience will only be great if your employee experience is greater. Right? And in particular, in these times, you need to have an engaged workforce. You need to ensure that workforce is actually that the workforce is actually delivering on your business goals still, regardless the pandemic and the current situation. And we also see here different, let's say, impact levels. We have organizations like professional service organizations like ours, right, where the impact between how employees feel and how they deliver work is directly to be seen. And we have other organizations like in construction work, but this might be a different thing, but also will become visible potentially 15 years later when a brick falls down the wall. Hopefully not, right? So that being said, we need to keep them pretty much engaged. And the future of work and HR has multiple dimensions, Natalie. And I think we spoke about this up front when we were going through the latest results of the 2021 Global Talent Trends, right? The where, the when, the how, the what, the who. Again, the question, who's going to embrace that from a corporate perspective and driving it forward? Because I think this is on every CEO's agenda at the moment, right? So that being said, how is this all evolving? How is the evolution of this when it comes to flexibility? And this is, we see companies, going back and forth. So some companies, and I just read yesterday a quote from Rohrscheidt, the CEO of Adidas, who says, work is social. We need to have people coming together, work together, be creative together, and creativity and performance is lacking if there is no venue where they can come together and jointly co-work on ideas and jointly develop new products and such. And on the other hand, there is the positive effect of having more flexibility to also source talent from other geographies where you usually would not have access to, right? And to show a little bit how this can come together and how this can build a best fit flexibility strategy, we have to take both perspectives, not only the employer perspective. It's all about understanding, how can we ensure sustainable growth, stay competitive, but also keep in mind the retention. But yes, also reducing overhead costs. And then on the other hand, looking onto the employee experience and learn, what is in for them? How could they positively get use of this new situation? And how can we learn to drive this more remote and hybrid employee experience? I think that's a key point. So to build the future state vision, and this is one thing, again, nobody else can do this as good as HR, is to learn what are the different models we could provide in the future as workforce for the future model. So the flex on site, for example, where we say like, what is the percentage of the workforce which could or must be on site for certain activities? Where are like hub-based models where you say like it's a little bit less of the percentage, for example, 3 days office, 2 days remote, or the other way around. This all needs a good governance model and a good framework, right? The people only working from home, where we say we barely ever see them again in one of our offices. And there was also this interesting article in the Harvard Business Review about offices becoming more of cathedrals, right, where you come together and renew your belief and purpose, but it's not necessary to believe that you stay permanently in the church, that everybody is believing you, that you follow that. Or also to have like a club mentality where it's like work and travel remotely, but able to access wherever you need. And this is a typical model for professional service organizations, where you have your offices, you can, you know, jump in and work from there if needed. We're now in a very extreme situation with the pandemic, but I think in the way forward, the workforce of the future could be sorted in one of these four models. But we also work with clients on you know, having more shakedown personas for their business and purposes and needs. So that being said, if you compare that to the capabilities of the average HR organization as it is today, we are falling short in most cases to deliver on that, and for in particular to deliver an outstanding remote and hybrid employee experience, right? So that has not been on the agenda for quite a long time, and we meet many organizations where the current status is still, we just developed you know, a 3-leg model, or we just had another round of McKinsey, BCG, and or others coming in, or an SG&A exercise where we just moved all our HR operations to somewhere else, and even jeopardized our employee experience because it was not designed end-to-end anymore. And if you look into the global talent trends data, then we get some interesting hints, right? If my company does not become significantly more digitized and agile by 2020, it will not be longer competitive, right? And so 1 out of 2 executives are concerned about this consumer grade experience today. And these numbers, I can share the outlook on 2021 trends already, even though they're not out yet. This is that even grew, right? So this negative perception or the fear is even more now, because now almost every CEO recognized the relevance of being able to deliver digitized experience. And also we had this in an early discussion, very often it's not the majority of the workforce being under digitized or not digitized enough. Very often it's the senior management lagging behind. The second number I want to share with you is the 3-pillar model, and it's still the organization didn't change much yet. So we're doing just minor adjustments, but obviously that didn't pay into an exemplary employee experience yet, because only 4% of the HR teams themselves say we deliver that, right? And this should be scary if we understand how important a good employee experience is to keep motivation up, to have to show empathy, and to underline the purpose of an organization, like the organizational glue. Then this is something which is alarming for us. And 58% of the companies have transformed the organization to be more people-centric and digital, right? And that was 2020, and this is like up to the 85% in the meantime, because it is without any alternative at the moment. So there are some key questions tied to that. So how can we become more customer-centric in the HR function? How can we become more cost-effective and add higher value? Because this is still what the CEOs are asking for. Like, yes, we can become more people-focused, but what can we save, right? How can we become? How can we utilize more automated processes and get this into the right priority? Like where to start? And this is what, when we talk to our clients, is one of the key things where they're really struggling. Like, hey, I have so many balls in the air. Like, I have to discuss furloughs, restructuring. I have to discuss cost cutting. I have to reorganization, home office to organize that, setting the governance framework and such. So putting that into the right agenda, I think, is one of the key challenges, beside the common goals for the HR function, right? So becoming more customer focused, collaborative, responsive, and agile. So we talked about agile already, but also, you know, to be there, more digital and strategic, but also, as we've been asked for, to deliver on efficient and cost effective. And we refer to talking about, you know, where to start quite often. I think first thing to understand is that HR transformation is always multidimensional. So when we talk about transforming the function, it's not about reorganizing only or optimizing processes or coming up with new, let's say, content around governance or policies or strategies, or changing a system. You all have to transform all four dimensions in sync around people. Because if you don't think it or don't design it around people, the adoption rate of your HR services will be so low that it might become a misinvestment. And in particular, when you don't have them in your office buildings anymore, you need to have these digital outreach. And if they're not adopting the services there, this will create either bad leadership or a bad service or an under-motivated workforce. So that being said,
I think this sounds really obvious when you look at it, right? But I think it is a real paradigm shift here, because when we think back, this is not how we have done HR transformation historically, and we should have, because systemic thinking has not been, it's not a new invention, but most HR transformations in the past have been driven, through a process lens, like Patrick said, process efficiency, and it hasn't been done centered around people. And that's why we've ended up with an employee experience that is somewhat disconnected, because we haven't got a seamless experience. And now, to Gillian's point earlier, we now have a massively competitive environment around, talent scarcity is bothering almost every industry now. That is now a problem. We can't afford that any longer. And I think that, that is really the key thing. HR has to now regroup and really put people at the heart. And we haven't done it up to now.
Yeah. So it's multidimensional on the one hand side, and the other one is it has to be targeted, right? So, and this is why we said, like, we cannot continue designing HR organizations just by drawing boxes and lines first and say, like, yeah, okay, this is shared service somewhere east. This is some kind of HR business partners, like the generalist who can do almost everything plus being strategic and such. So we said, now we need to understand who are our internal clients, what do they need, and employees includes everybody here, like from manager to executives to flexible workforce to candidates, like literally everybody within the organization who needs to be served. And we need to understand what will be our HR service portfolio we want to deliver, and how do we bring these two things together. So it's a little bit like this here, right? How will we design this interaction, right? And what kind of experience can we actually create? Or even though you can industrialize an employee experience, we can all, experience that when we go to Apple and we have our, issue being told upfront, and we get to this genius bar and somebody helps us, like he would have just been waiting for us, like, hey, I can do this for you, right? And but in the back end, there are many procedures which are focusing on my specific need in that moment. Or we can talk about more concierge design models where we say, like, hey, for an executive, for example, I need something where the executive exactly gets what he wants at that moment, but this is strategic advice and not, pulling papers for him. And this is where we usually fall short, right? So, and I think if you compare the process-centric model to the pull model, so Josh Burson was so kind to write something about this. I think it's important to understand that we are talking about journeys. We're talking about intended interactions, things we want to happen, and not things which accidentally happen or where we react on. So we pre-design the pathway, we pre-design the journeys. And what's even more important, we need to co-design this with the business, because very often, like, the HR silo just sits beside the business silo and there's no interaction. We have heard that earlier, right? So getting analogies from how marketing thinks, understanding what are the must-win battles for the business and why I as an HR function should serve on that one, right? But also, and coming back to the multidimensional approach, understand what are the available tools you need to actually deliver that, right? And then adapt it from the agile methodology, prototype, test, iterate. It doesn't have to be perfect from the very beginning. Well, you should be a little bit consistent with your payroll, right? But when it comes to an adaptive performance management process in these times, you can also test things and say, like, let's try it that way, right? And learn new things about organization, in particular when you include the business or stakeholders through sounding boards and such. You can learn so much how to increase the adoption of these new models and the HR services. That's very beneficial. And doing that means that you need to understand the full life cycle. And you have seen many pictures, I guess, around how the employee life cycle could be informed, but you have to consider this life cycle around moments that actually matter, right? And they might be different than what we expect from the HR service portfolio perspective, what we then think is relevant for them. Ask them, talk to them, go into interaction. We did a project with Daimler 1.5, 2 years ago. After, I think we were the 4th company coming in to restructure their recruiting, right? And they said, like, we are not successful enough. But we were the first company actually asking for, what does the candidate actually want and how can you segment the candidate groups? And like, oh, that's interesting. We designed a perfect process, but nobody talked to the client, meaning in this case, the candidate, right? So that being said, really design these events. Targeted interaction, that's the key figure behind it. What is the thing we want to happen and how can we satisfy the internal client group? We have good experience on that with SAP, for example. So we did that with SAP as Mercer and tried to uplift the HR function to understand, like, what is the moments we want to create in each and every life cycle event we have throughout the SAP life cycle. So from hire to retire, getting the application, SAP first day, getting reassured during life events, getting approached to take new opportunities. So what are the things we want to experience and what are the things we want them to experience throughout that? And if you would think this sounds too like this is luxury in COVID times, right? No, it isn't, because even we feel now even more we need to be close to our employees, because relevant talent not being fully engaged and valued, they have different opportunities. I can tell by ourselves, like, how other organizations, consulting companies are showing up and they're like, hey, isn't it time to change, right? Come to a new company. We have this and that to offer. And if you're too far away from your employees and not creating these moments that matter, and you screw your basic HR stuff, right? People get frustrated and feel like, hey, that might not be the right place anymore. So the good question is how to actually get there, and how does an HR transformation approach, that was just an SAP example again. And how does an HR transformation approach look like? And what we developed as a consulting firm is a so-called HR accelerator, where we say, like, we say we need to be quick. So we need to have a very simplified approach how to get from the current status into a more relevant status for our organization. And this is all about, how to set the project up, understand the must-win battles of the business, because things like strategy in these days almost don't exist, right? It's changing almost on a monthly basis where you point your direction. So developing design principles for the future HR organization, understanding must-win battles, deriving people priorities in your way forward, I think is one of the key elements you have to have. And then you have to go into, sorry, Natalie, I interrupted you.
Yeah. I'm just trying to weave something in, because I've been reading Trinette's question here in the chat, and I think her point links into this. Because what she's talking about here is, on the one hand, you have employee preferences, right? And very current right now. You've got lots of employees telling us, actually, we want to keep working from home. We want to maintain some level of flexibility that we've proven we are productive in over the last few months. But then you have company needs, on the other hand, and does, how do you then actually combine the two? Because what Trinette's talking about as well is, are there new work realities then therefore meaning that companies will go somewhere else for skills? And what does that then mean, for the HR function? Location structures busted in effect. And And I think that these are the real questions, obviously, that we now all have to grapple with. And maybe you can bring to life in terms of how those questions actually are getting answered, because that's exactly what needs to happen at the beginning. You know, understand the business reality and then understand what your employees want, and how do you bring those perspectives together?
Well, when it comes to, I utilized this picture a little bit earlier, but I think this is pretty much showing like the best flexibility, like getting both perspectives together, and how can we utilize the new normal for us to become most effective, but also incorporate the employee perspective. How can we ensure that they benefit from the new situation, the new setup, but also how do I serve this, right? If they don't come back to the cathedral, if they don't come back to the offices, and how do we ensure that they have everything they need to be successful, to contribute to these must-win battles for the business, right?
Yeah.
But that requires, and let me continue here. You need to understand how the organization is set up as of today, from a process perspective, the business impact so far, the current governance model, the current degree of automation, but also how is the employee experience perceived, to come up with a relevant prototype and say like, okay, no, we need to rapidly change that. We need to definitely run a different way of our HR operations, how we serve our managers, how we serve our workforce, how we distinct our workforce as well, and ensure that that this new design can be implemented rapidly and try it out. I mean, every organization has been brave enough to switch to work from home within 1 or 2 weeks, right? We have seen organizations where employees carried home screens and computers in the very beginning to stay connected to the organization. So that being said, how does a target interaction model in theory look like? And you will see a lot of what ABM was just sharing, but in a different setup. So I think first it's crucial to understand who are we serving, and we're talking about here. You call it extended workforce. We sometimes call it flexible workforce. So every client has a different perspective on that one. But we have candidates. We have flexible. We have the regular associate or the individual contributor. We have people managers. Everybody leading people, and in nowadays being more project driven. This also could be a project manager running a bigger project. We had an interesting project with PVH, so the corporation behind Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger, where we figured out that almost a quarter of all leadership work had been executed by project leads, because a collection like the Winter Collection 2021, right? This is a project. This is not a department. So, and the project lead managed 100 people. So leadership skills, allowing people, when can you need a training on this or need to learn that, and or moderating conflicts, right? But this role has not been supported. So understanding who people managers are, but also that their needs are pretty leadership driven. So to keep the team motivated, the dynamics positive and such, I think these are key elements of understanding what a people manager wants. And top management needs something completely different. They need support on restructuring, on reorganizing. They need support on data. They need support on how to capture new market shares and such. So that being said, we said like, well, this needs more distinct roles, right? So an HR partner in this model here, for example, this client example, as the exclusive contact for a people manager, exclusively serving them in their people and leadership related topics, not doing their admin work, not being a generalist, not being the strategic advisor on HR business partner, just being let's call them a partner in crime to generate good leadership, because we all think, right, and all our strategic initiatives push towards the direction of good leaders create great revenues. So HR should create good leaders, right? And to support them more focused. We said like in this interaction model, this must be a very focused role where top management might need people strategy advice, right? Someone being more experienced, pretty clear on, you know, what are the major decisions an HR function can support or consult on. making the people dimension in the transformation of an organization successful. But we also saw what also Isabel was referring to with the self-service, like first point of contact, gaining more insights through smart technology, RPA being utilized. We have portals like ServiceNow, PeopleDoc, all paying into that, where we can be much smarter and much more remote and more adaptive, because the systems are smart enough today to understand who am I? Am I blue collar, white collar? Am I a people leader? Yes or no? And showing me the right content. And being adaptive as a function, and show the right content in the right moment. Like this is performance review time, so showing information about that, right? It's easy things, but you need to fully embrace them. And this is why content, process, and organization and system need to be aligned in this transformation. Now, moving over to the right, you see here the distinction between centers of excellence and centers of competence. And we say there is a distinction when it comes to expertise. Some of these experts act directly with client contact, meaning when it's about talent acquisition, the competence center has contact to, for example, candidates or talent development. People actually drive talent development programs or process experience, working together with my colleagues in HR to design great end-to-end processes. Where in Comp and Ben, for example, we don't want the head of C&B or his or her teammates to work with each and every people leader or people manager on how the merit increase should be executed, right? So one is more, what is guideline policy thinking around it, is soaking it into our service portfolio, where others are having more direct client contact. And then we have above here the agile pool, and a role which sits within this agile pool as a project portfolio manager, understanding like, is the request coming from the business something we could serve with our standard portfolio of HR, or is that something which is like a project? And an interesting figure here also to share is the last, I would say, 25 to 30 clients we worked with, we evaluated not where they actually use the capacity. And we came to the point, and PVH was one of the examples, Aldi Süd was another one, that 30 to 40% of the capacity has been utilized in projects beside the day-to-day business. And now this makes pretty clear, why these SG&A exercises really write down like 5 minutes per reading one application, then click. And then somebody telling you like you're having 20% too many resources in HR doesn't make sense, because they only look for standard transactions and not where you actually have your capacity being bound. But that also shows the problem. We commit to many projects and don't organize projects within HR in a professional manner, regardless if they are within the function or cross-functional, right? So we need to professionalize our acting also as a project organization, because we learned that almost every transformation, if minor or major, is formed or utilized through a project, right? But very often poorly managed.
Armin, you've sort of touched on it, spoken to it, but what would you summarize is the key difference between the COE, which many COE people have suffered in under the Ulrich model, right? And this additional sort of center of competence unit?
Well, the center of competence really is something which is close to the market. So they are thinking and acting directly with direct client contact. So like in recruiting, where we say centers of excellence are the ones where I say it's more about policies and guidelines, creating strategies, and utilizing the HR body, regardless if it's HR partner, the HR services, or people strategy advisor, to almost evaporate this guidelines or thinking into the organizations, the tools, and the models. And this, I mean, in the very end, when it comes to translating this target interaction model into an operating model, we need to make the distinction of resources, right? For talent acquisition, to win the war for talent, in particular in these strategic requests, like the digital talent, like the data scientist everybody's looking for, but nobody's finding it, right? But we need like 500, and you can find one, and post and pray doesn't work. And utilize active sourcing. We say active sourcing, the most efficient way of doing that, the most effective way of doing that is having an own active sourcing unit, right? But that requires resources. The COE design very often is more linked to having expertise sitting somewhere pushing out guidelines. But I also have to say, this is not a model like this is the truth for all companies. This pretty much varies from company to company. What is a COE, a COC? And this also goes back to how dependent is my business model to people, right? Professional services organization where we say like there's a high people dependency, you know, to be successful in my line of business. And let's take the other end of the road, is construction work, where I say like, I can change a resource within a heartbeat. You know, it's not critical, but finding, for example, we're working a lot with major law firms in the past, right? Finding the right lawyer or finding the right talent in law firms, right, could take 1, 2, 3 years, or take consultancy or financial advisory, right? So there is a distinction, and that also defines the service portfolio I have to provide. Like what is, and this is why the cascade is, what are the must-win battles for the business? What are the derived people priorities? How do we want to design this future HR service portfolio and interaction model? And then we move around the puzzle piece. Like this seems like we need an active sourcing unit because we are short in talent. That would not apply, for example, to a construction firm. There, for example, the comp topic could be one where you say like, hey, this has to be more operational when you work with many contractors, like 2/3 of the people working here, the major construction site, are contractors, and they are not hired by the main contractor anymore. So you need to coordinate this as well. So it's pretty much related to what the business purpose is.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. Starting here on the left-hand side, that is your start point effectively. So defining what are your key people segments, and that already will look different from business to business. So we've got some clients that would have female employees as a segment that they call out because they have a business critical need to increase the participation of females in the workforce, and they recognize their needs are different and they haven't been attended to sufficiently in the past, and therefore it's important enough to actually call them out as a key segment. And there might be other segments. So
exactly.
And that then determines, straight away a different interaction model. So there are different, obviously, in the flow that Armin just showed, that's in the start phase. That's really the key parameters that need to be defined for every business in a bespoke way. What are your key segments? What are your key business must-win battles? And therefore setting the parameters for this work.
Yeah, and it can be even department forms or teams we don't know yet, right? The one big law firm we're working with right now, they found out that they're losing too much talent on the partner stream. So their strategic topic will be diversity and inclusion. They want to win back all female talent they lost throughout the last years, right? And therefore, together with comp, together with org effectiveness, their aspiration is to build the most modern, most flexible work hour system so that female talent in law firms can be won back and contribute however they want, right? But the gap, the pain is so big that they say we are being forced. Our business priority or must-win battle is exactly to win this talent because there is not enough talent on the lawyers market out there. I'm looking a little bit on timing. There's 2 more slides just about some examples. You'll find this in the documentation. Also, like how this how results might look like. The question might arise: how do we work as consultants in these times? Refer to the Aldi Süd project we're running right now. We're transforming their HR function completely remotely since 9 months at the moment. So also that works, but it's a different way also for us how to deliver our work and how to form teams and contribute to our success. Right. That being said, that was a bit quick because I promised I will not talk 5 minutes to each and every slide of the 41 we had, but let's use the last minutes for some questions if you have to. I cannot see the chat here while I'm presenting, so bear with me.
Oh, I read the chat. I can see the chat. So fire away in the chat. I have one question. Thinking about, I think Patrick was that who said that before in the previous session. He said the problem with HR transformation is, you know, the business strategy changes, and then you can start all over again. So how do you see that? How is that solvable? Because obviously you know, we're not going to see a decline in pace of change. That will only increase. So how will that?
Well, as of now, in most cases, we are reactive with HR. The moment we have been able to turn around the full tank of HR, you know, it's almost too late. Which is why we have this distinct role model where I say, like, the people strategy advisor will be the first one to recognize and to know and to share with his HR colleagues, like, oops, there's something coming up, and can only already give heads up in the discussion process of a strategy adoption or strategy change. Like, okay, this will have major impact to our employment model, or we have to keep this on our agenda because, or the answer might be that doesn't change much for us, right? It's just a different way of delivering business, but from an HR perspective, we can give you relief, we can bear that, right? But being much closer through this focused role rather than having a generalist here and then being contributing, participating, this is one of the elements where I can serve that. And don't focus too much on strategy, be closer to this terminology of must-win battles for the business. I think that matches better based on our experience. Any more questions?
Also feel free to come off mute. I guess we can allow you to come off mute, right, Jillian? Are people allowed to come off mute? So
yeah, all you have to do is unmute. So yeah, it'd be great to have some interaction in person.
We've got one question here from Joanne just coming in. Can you expand on the difference in the role of an HR partner versus a people strategy advisor?
So the HR partner really is a focused role. We found out that the correlation at people managers is that they in most cases responsible for critical business, and they're responsible for value creation, they're responsible for sales, they're responsible for so many other things than leading people and developing talent. But in the past, to become relevant in organization, the only way to get recognition was a promotion towards a leadership role. On the one hand, even though sometimes some of these people were not talented enough to be leaders at the same time. And on the other hand, for the ones, you know, growing up, they still need to be excellent when it comes to their team. And therefore, we have this distinct role of an HR partner, supporting in all aspects of talent management and leadership development, team development, and consulting this team, really focusing on that, but also representing the HR service portfolio towards the leader. Because we also recognize that very often the leadership instruments being developed in the, for example, talent development COC never landed with the people manager because they just didn't have time or didn't get it, or it was not pushed there. So we're using this partner to be a real partner, and almost like in a permanent situation where the people strategy advisor is really focusing on the bigger wheels to turn on a strategic level, talking about the whole organization, talking about strategic directions.
Maybe I can throw in a question. It's Hugh Mitchell here, because yeah, I can see a lot of the logic of the model you're putting forward. A question that's always in my mind is, if you move to such a model, what is the path that someone goes through to become the HR partner or people strategy advisor? I mean, in the early phases of any new structure, you populate, you fill the jobs with people who have previous backgrounds and so on. So I was thinking, you know, if you were to take a young graduate coming into the workforce in their early 20s, what's the kind of path that they would take to typically be effective in these would be critical roles?
Well, interesting enough, Santander Bank, who we worked with this model like 5 or 6 years ago, they decided that the first step for a new joiner will be to spend some time in HR services, HR operations, to understand like what's the grassroots level, you know, and what are you impacting when you as an HR partner or other HR role just screw it. It's like coming up with new ideas is great, but it has to be funneled. Right? So, but other than that, it requires reskilling. but the reskilling is easier because you can focus. You have to assess your workforce. You have to walk and talk through your organization, like who is stronger on the leadership development side, who might be a better comp person and might sit in this area, but also requires here and then a change or a new hire. Interesting enough, for the people strategy advisor, I would say 1/3 of all placements there are placed outside the HR organization, meaning a former general manager, a former marketing specialist, a former business developer with good people skills, meaning a good, how do you say that? There's the German word for that. A good censorship for organization, how an organization is acting and behaving and feeling. That's a pattern I can already recognize. Yeah.
I mean, James is asking, I think this HR partner people strategy advisor is an understandably sort of compelling change. James is asking, he understood that the way you described the HR partner, it sounded almost like an account manager.
Yes.
Is that the way?
We sometimes use that and call it the key account manager between the people manager and the HR portfolio, because you need to know both best, like the client need on the left side, but also your portfolio and how you bring this together. Mm-hmm. And one of the key activities is what we say, the expression of pulling in. And this might be pulling in the comp expert, pulling in the change or diversity expert, pulling in the talent development expert when it's about starting initiatives in a team or a department or such. So yes, the HR partner is, beside being a coach and a consultant, the coordinator, meaning a key accountant. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Louise is asking again, related to this people strategy advisor role, and their business has considered the shift, but there were reservations from the business. Do you run into sort of resistance from a business perspective, and how do you overcome that?
Well, the resistance is normal, because in the past HR in many cases haven't been very strategic, and this has multiple reasons. I mean, it starts from when a CEO asks for headcount. In most cases, he goes to the CFO and not to the CHRO. So if it starts already there, mm-hmm. and there is a lack of trust. There is a lack of trust in the HR function. So you need to utilize, you need to own your HR data. You need to understand the business and the relevance. And this is why we focus on people priorities derived from this must-win battles for the business, is like showing that you can lever and contribute on a strategic, in a strategic way to the organization. My kids are coming home. Sorry for the background noise.
Tells us that this is not your house, what we're looking at.
Exactly. Now you know.
Good. I mean, we're coming close to the full hours. Hugh, Gillian, would you like to wrap up? It was a delightful session. Thanks for all of you who contributed, and obviously, if you want to carry on the conversation, we're here for virtual coffees.
Yeah. So just to say, Armin and Natalie, thank you very much. That's a really interesting session, and I think is reflected in the sort of the depth and the quality of the questions coming through. I mean, I think and thank you for sharing a real kind of practical framework around thinking about operating models. I think a lot of the discussion around HR operating models can be quite sort of esoteric. So to root that in something that we can really see and get into the nitty gritty of what do the different roles look like and how do they all work together has been a really fruitful session. So thank you for that. We will be sharing the recording and the slides from both the first CRF session and the Mercer session. So for those of you who'd like to review this, share with colleagues, please feel free to do so. And Armin and Natalie would very much like to follow up with people who've joined this session, if you're interested in furthering the discussion. If you don't want that to happen, then please do let us know, and we will action that. But just remains to say thank you very much to our audience for your participation, and to wish you all a very happy Christmas when it comes. This is the last session for CRF for this year, so we look forward to welcoming you to our sessions in 2021. So thank you very much.